Hello, one and all, and welcome to another episode where we look at another episode of Kamen Saber. We are on the penultimate episode, episode 44, or chapter 44, Open the Last Page. And I'm going to be honest, there are two reasons why we haven't done why we haven't been here. For those of you who didn't know, basically all of Toei's big three, Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and even Pretty Cure, took a bit of a week vacation because of the Olympics airing around the same time slot, similar to the whole golf thing that happens every season where a big golf tournament cuts into the Kamen Rider and Super Sentai run. And also Saber and Zenkaiser and decided to do a crossover episode, which isn't particularly canon to either. I think it might be canon to Zenkaiser, but not canon to Saber, because it's like only counted as like a 0.5 episode. Like it's like episode 43.5 or special chapter. I decided not to do that one, mainly because it was just a fun episode. There really wasn't much I could talk about. It was just like, oh, this episode's pretty fun. I would have ended up talking more about Zenkaiser than I would have talked about Saber. And because it's the Saber episode reviews, I figured that would break the rule, per se. Anyway, we are here to talk about this penultimate episode as we go into our finale. So, let's talk about the episode. So, for those who need a refresher on what's happened, basically, Storios' plan has worked. He's managed to merge his own body with the body of the Cryptus Megiddo after it had eaten... she doesn't really give it a name, so I'm just going to call her Red Sophia. The Red Sophia clone, and all the people that were converted into Wonder Ride books, as well as the other founder books into his own body. So basically he's an amalgamation of a lot of different shit, a lot of different power sources into one body. And this has allowed him to create a new Wonder Ride book, the Grimoire, and now he is Kamen Rider Storios. So the episode actually starts off with Storios basically unveiling his new power as Wonderworld's encroachment continues, basically as bleeding into the real world. And at first, nobody notices this outside of the people who were connected to Wonderworld that Toma had managed to save. But quickly, everyone else begins to notice it because, shit starts to break. I forgot what they were called. We have not seen, the Mooks in, so long. I forgot there were Mooks in this series. But I don't think they're the same Mooks. I think these are the Mooks that were used for the movie. So were they named in the movie? I don't remember. Anyway, these things start showing up and people are getting attacked all over the place. Toma and friends try to do what they can to stop it, but they really can't. They can't do the ceiling thing anymore. And even Yuri's body starts to be affected because, he's connected to Wonderworld as he gave up his physical form to become the Sword of Light. So he's kind of dying. And then Storios decides to just walk up because they're like, hey, we've got to find Storios in order to stop this. So he just walks up and we get his transformation as Kamen Rider Storios. It looks pretty cool. And he then summons four dudes. These are the four sages. The other leaders of the Swords of Logos, that Master Logos, are... I forget his name already. That he created... that he killed to take over the organization in its entirety. Though Storios revived them and connected them to his own Wonder Ride book to act as his main minions, or enforcers. And so they fight, and Storios himself doesn't really fight, he just kind of watches on the sidelines until he does the finisher on Toma, and they end up losing. Because obviously when the final boss walks up for the first round, the heroes kind of have to lose or else there wouldn't really be any plot. So they lose, and the rest of the episode is basically just everyone basically resolving themselves for the final battle, and basically Storios pulling a fucking revolt and making a giant tower for the heroes to show up to fight them. We get Daisenji, aka Slash, he ends up basically sharpening the other swords so that they're ready for battle. And during this moment, it's weird because obviously Sophia, since she's sent it to Wonderworld, as she is kind of a copy of Luna, as she starts to fade away, but then Yuri gives her the Sword of Darkness, and basically that is able to stabilize her, so she's currently the new Caliber. And for those who debate that, they kind of reveal that she will transform into Caliber in the next episode, and I have thoughts on that. And then we get to see Yuri because, he's fading away slowly. He's kind of lamenting shit. So we might die by the end of this. I'm kind of sad about that, in all honesty. Sophia might die too, because if Yuri's gonna die, she might die with him. We get to see Rio with his wife. His fucking wife is back. She came back to Japan. I don't know where she was. That might be explained in his prequel manga. So she's back, and they have a nice family moment, and it's kind of cute. And I kind of wish that this was the story. Like, honestly, I think Rio's probably my favorite character in Saber, just because the dude's doesn't have any super complex shit to worry about. He is like, I'm a father who fights to protect the future for his son. That's all he needed to be, and he was. We have an interesting moment because Rentaro goes to see the Shindai siblings, who are in the room of spirit and time, Dragon Ball reference, training, like they're training in their version of it, and he goes to them, and it's like a kind of moment because Reika's super aggro against him, like, why are you here? And then just fucking Ryoga's like, when is the fight? And it's like kind of a cool moment. Like the Zenkaichi episode honestly made me like these two a lot better, but it still feels weird how they're just kind of considered part of the good guys after all the shit that they kind of help facilitate. Anyway, we then cut to Ren and Kento, and Ren's basically just standing around holding onto his ass books and the falchion sword, the sword of nothingness. And it's interesting because they deliberately set up someone to be the next Caliber, but they haven't set up anyone to be falchion. And I honestly feel that's a bit of a waste, considering you can have literally all the suits fighting, but I guess, you just want to have this 10, because 11 might be too many. Anyway. Shit, I'm blanking. It's a kind of cool moment between the pair. Ren's basically finished his character on. He's like, I don't really have a reason to, but I have a reason to stop the world from ending, so I'm going to fight. And it feels weird because I know he's probably going to run into the fight in his standard Kienzan form, just running up using the falchion sword. I forget what its actual name is. And I honestly feel this would be a good opportunity to give him a power-up that combines the two swords. So like what we should have done with Kento, but we're not going to do it. Because it's budget. Budget and awkwardness. So, yeah. Anyway, as for... We also have another moment with Rentaro as he goes to see Mei for a hot moment. We get some shipping fuel as he tells her to wait for him for when the battle's over. And it's kind of cute. Again, I like these two. At this point, I don't even know why I like them so much. I just really like them and their pairing because it's really kind of cute. And then we have Toma. He's just sitting by him and Kento's old tree from when they were kids. And they used to, that same spot where they used to hang out with Luna and everybody. I mean, it was just the three of them. There was no everybody else. And so, they're just sitting around, and then Luna shows up because she's basically been debating this whole time, what does she want to do? Because, if she can save the world if she goes to Toma, but then Toma will have to leave the whole world behind and basically take up Tassel's role and being the guardian of Wonderworld until somebody else can come along and do it, or a new woman head to the Wonderworld will show up. So, obviously she's fading away because, Wonderworld's kind of encroaching and all that shit, so everyone connected to the Wonderworld is feeling the burn. Oh, they also mentioned that if the encroachment continues, that the Wonder Ride books would lose their power, and that's kind of cool. But I doubt that would play into anything. Like it could add a pretty cool ticking clock element. It's like the more it encroaches, some of them lose their powers and can only just fight with the swords instead of using their armors, being all hinched up. Like that would be kind of cool, but I doubt that will happen. Anyway, they're sitting around, and then Luna shows up. As I said that earlier, my mind. Yeah, she basically shows up, and she tries to run away for a hot second, and then Toma does a funny, and they reenact a bit of a play that they. From the framing, it's shown that this was actually the play that him and Kento performed when they first met Luna, or at least the scene they performed when they first met Luna, because Luna approached them asking, "Hey, what are you two doing? What story is that from?" Then they acted out a scene, and this is actually a scene from that. And in the middle of all of that, something weird happens, and Luna just ages herself up. I'm just like, why didn't you do this earlier? So now she is, I'm going to assume, around the same age that Toma and Kento are, and they have a cool moment where she basically continues her moral debate on what exactly she should be doing. Honestly, they should have probably given her Falchion, let her become Rider Falchion. I mean, come on, it would have made a lot. It would have made better sense to giving Sophia Caliber. Anyway, so Storios makes his big old evil move, makes a big old tower, and basically calls out the riders to fight him. And then we get a kind of cool walking shot where everybody walks up towards the tower, and in order to start the final episode. And I have only one question. So we never saw where Reika, at least Toma's initial sword, went, since Cross Saber, uses its own sword, and the Cross Saber, pun. But for the rest of the episode, we don't see it. And it's not like it was taken by Storios or destroyed. We just switch back to Reika because we need everyone in base form for the final fight for a cool henshin shot, which will look cool, but I honestly think it would have added to the tension if, let's say, the Cross Saber were destroyed and our Toma just didn't have access to it for some reason or another. Like, they were using it as a linchpin to stop Wonderworld from encroaching anymore, but it just gets switched out with Reika, which I guess is still its own thing, although they never really explained that, so I'm just left wondering a number of things. Anyway, and that's when the episode ends. So, yeah, I kind of already started, but let's get into thoughts. So, initial thoughts, considering that they have to set up the final boss in literally one episode before we have to deal with them, this does work. I actually came away liking this episode a lot, if only for how simple it was. It was a pretty simple episode, focused a lot on our main cast and their feelings and all that kind of stuff, and introduced the final threat that the group has to take on. I would have preferred if this were more, instead of how rushed it ultimately does feel. And I'm getting flashbacks to a certain other series and how its final villain setup felt kind of rushed in, the last episode. I don't know, I just prefer series where we have a building threat to the final boss, and that, they can actually be a bit more present as the final boss before we actually have to fight them or deal with them. And you could argue that Storios has been present since the beginning, but he was very much in the background, which I guess works. It's kind of like Evolt again, although in Evolt's case, he was also a bit more of an active threat. And another thing about Storios is they never fully explain his motives. At least with Isaac, I remembered his name, they explained he's just doing it for the shits and giggles. Storios is just like, well, I was good friends with Tassel, and then one day I convinced all my friends to basically be a bunch of assholes, and then decided that on that day I would spend hundreds of years working to end the world. It feels really random when you put it that way, and that's basically his character in a nutshell. It feels really random that he just wants to end the world, or end the story, as he says it, for some reason. It just feels kind of forced. Uh, Outside of that threat, as a presence as the final villain, he does work. Uh, Again, I wish his motives were a bit more explained and we had an understanding of his character, which we really do lack at the moment. Outside of that, I do like that he does have foot soldiers because we have so many riders. It'll make sense to give us at least some enemy force outside just the main villain to fight. The Lords of Wise, as they're called. I said it earlier. They're the four sages that Isaac killed, and then Storiel survived them using the power of his own book, the Grimoire, as it's called. Speaking of, I honestly love the henchman sound for Grimoire. It has that very deep villain voice thing that I kind of love, and like the villainous henchman devices, and I honestly do like it. Like, it's very much just a recolor and different sounds than the Omniforce book, which is fairly obvious, but I just like it. Also, I like the Lords of Wise. I kind of wish that they had their own, like, henshin devices, or at least their own Wonder Ride books, because I kind of like their suits, and just feels like, I know they're connected to Storios' books, so technically they're part of the Grimoire, but I feel like it would do a bit better if they had their own, like, books. Like, you know what I mean? Like, sort of like how Horseshoe Crab started becoming, like, the Mook in 01. Horseshoe Crab are the Pinecone Arms, and Gaim, I forget its actual name. I'm sorry. I need to revisit Gaim. I'm just looking for excuses to rewatch Gaim at this point. Anyway, I like them. I like the idea behind it. I like that they each have their own weapons, and that they basically apparently are masters of individual styles of the rider styles. Like, it's sort of like, and I'm gonna use Demon Slayer as an example because it's probably the only one I can think of that does this, at least in recent memory. How in Demon Slayer, the original breathing technique was the technique of the sun, and then how the various other breathing techniques were derived from it in their own unique ways, like the mist, the flame, water, etc., as more unique combinations of the techniques that were originally derived from the sun user. In this case, these four are the originators of the techniques that are used by the various Kamen Riders or swordsmen, and they are masters of it, so they can use obviously their abilities, but the Kamen Riders have their own unique ways of using it now because it's been derived via them after so many years. Again, I like the idea. I doubt they would execute it, but I do like the idea. I also like the fact that they all have their own different names. Like, we have Spartan, Highlander, Diego, and Kuon. And I'm kind of curious about where their names originate from. Like, Spartan and Highlander, that makes a bit of sense to me. But Diego and Kuon, I'm kind of curious on where those names actually come from. Like, the first two are obviously, like, different types of warriors. But the other two, like, they must be a different type of warrior. But I'm wondering about what kind. Although I do like, they have their own weapons and their own form of attack. I like it when the villains are able to I like it when the series is able to diversify and have everybody have their own weapons, which is probably part of the reason that I continue to watch Saber. I hesitate to say like because there's a lot about the series I don't like. I'm going to save that for a big series overview episode after the final episode. Outside of the villain's front, which I've talked about I've talked about it for almost half the video length. I do like the mini character bits that each of the characters have that take up the bulk of the episode. It's pretty cute. Like, obviously, I'm very partial towards Buster's, because, he's probably my favorite character in Saber. So, I do like his little family moment. Yuri, I like Yuri's bit where he's kind of contemplating things, like contemplating life in a way. And Toma and Kento's is very, very cute. Like, it can border on cringe, but it's kind of really cute. It's a kind of cute scene of them reinforcing their childhood, although I'm kind of really upset that it took them this long to age up Luna, because we should have aged up this kid a while ago. No offense to the young actress they had portraying Luna up until now, but that whole scene a few episodes back where it's just Isaac holding this kid felt really fucking weird, my dudes. Like, that felt really weird, and I kind of wish that she was more Isaac. It would still feel weird, but it would feel less weird with the more adult woman than the child. I'm just saying. Anyway, that was fun. I like that they can have a conversation, because we really haven't had Luna, Toma, and Kento actually having a conversation throughout the entire series. Like, we've had Toma and Kento, but we haven't had really Luna's interjection on the whole deal. She just kind of popped in and out of reality, which feels kind of weird. I also really like the Rentaro and Mei thing, the shipping fuel that it is. I really hope that we do, get to the whole thing of whatever he wants to tell her. It's probably obviously a love confession, but, I just want to see it. Overall, I came away liking this episode more for what it does for the characters than the plot. I am looking forward to the next episode, if only to wrap up the series and the cool sword fight that hopefully will come about because of it. But yeah, this episode turned out pretty well, and I hope they can stick the landing, so to speak, and end the series off on a really good note. I mean, I know the series is going to get 46 episodes, because they still have one more episode in the time slot before they can move on to Revise, and I'm saving thoughts on Revise for after that first episode premieres. But yeah, overall, positive episode. Looking forward to the next one, and I'll see all of you next time. Till then, everybody.